All right, I think we're live. Yeah, we're live. All right. My opponent did not show today, which is fine. He must have had some other stuff come up, so I get another dub by default. But since we've tried to do this a few times, and I promise you guys we do it, I'm just going to go ahead and give my spiel, my case, making the case for Terrell Owens. Again, I'm taking. I actually do. I mean, this one's very close, but I actually do think Terrell Owens is an overall better and more consistent wide receiver. You could argue his highs. Randy Moss maybe has a couple years that are higher than. Um, what's up, guys? You're just gonna change your name to every single thing our topic is. That's pretty funny. uh, but Moss definitely has a couple years that are. Um, Moss definitely has a couple years that are higher than Owens, right? And I got Owens here on the left. I got Moss on the right. Obviously, one of those seasons came with the GOAT Tom Brady, so that should be taken into account. But I'm going to go ahead and make my case for why Terrell Owens is actually better. So first, let's just get to an overall statistical analysis. They essentially have the exact same career span. Moss has one more year, although he was retired 1 year as well, so that needs to be taken into account. They essentially played the same amount of games. Owens has about 700 more career yards. Owens has about 100 more receptions. They have the exact same amount of touchdowns whenever you count Terrell Owens' 3 rushing TDs, which just shows his versatility. The same amount of Pro Bowls. Owens has one more All-Pro. Yards per reception, Randy Moss has about a 1 yard advantage there. Owens has a higher reception yards per game at about half a yard, so again, negligible. And believe it or not, people knock on Owens for dropping passes. Owens actually has the higher catch percentage at 1.3% higher than Moss. And before people bring up quarterbacks, I went through and essentially just took whoever played the most or threw the most in a year, and I took their quarterback rating, not the more modern QBR, but their rating. And essentially, T.O.'s average rating for his quarterbacks was 91. Moss's was 92. So again, you just see how close these guys are in almost every single way. It should also be noted that Randy Moss had 16 fumbles in his career as well, while Owens, I think, only had 11, something like that, I believe. Let's see. And in terms of like big playability, Terrell Owens actually has 2 touchdowns over 90 yards. Moss never did that. And Owens, and then after those 90 yards, it kind of is back and forth between who has had the longest touchdown reception in each year. So again, in terms of big playability, I think Terrell Owens' ability to essentially catch any ball and house it is a big advantage over Randy Moss. In my opinion, Randy Moss sort of needs a good quarterback to get him the ball over the top, and whereas Owens can kind of catch the ball anywhere, and he's a danger. Going across the middle, obviously that's something Moss never really did, and that's something that Owens did a lot. You could argue that Owens is probably one of, if not the toughest receivers to probably tackle that has ever played in the league. Moss obviously has a little bit of a bigger catch ability in terms of like big catches over the top. But again, I think you need a better quarterback to sort of pull that off, as he did with Tom Brady, right, when they set the touchdown record. Um, let's see. Yeah, so Owens twice went over 90 yards on touchdowns, which Moss never did. StatHead also has an approximate value. However they measure that, I'm not exactly sure. Owens beats Moss by 5 points on that. I'm not sure that really matters, though. And although this doesn't matter either, Owens has more career fantasy points than Randy Moss, for anyone who wants to know. Uh, Owens also has more yards from scrimmage in his career by about 750 yards. Yeah, Owens played for Dallas. Yeah. Yeah, Owens, we'll get into that. We'll get into the longevity of Owens and why I think that's a big reason why he's better too here in a second. Randy Moss, as I mentioned, had 16 fumbles to Owens' 11. That's 5 more fumbles in his career. And then also keep in mind that Moss has the top 3 seasons between the two in terms of total targets. So again, I feel like overall Owens is doing more with less, or he does not have to just necessarily have a big throw play, right? Or like kind of like a big play to get his production. He can kind of catch it anywhere and house it, go across the middle or over the top, break tackles, etc. For whatever reason, I couldn't find yards after catch for these two guys. I feel like Owens would probably win that one, just depending. Owens also led the league in receiving yards per game one time. Moss surprisingly never did that. Twice Terrell Owens went over a 100-yard average per game. Twice going over a 90-yard average per game. Moss only did that one time each in his career, which I thought was interesting. I thought these are some of the categories that Moss would win. Moss had Randall Cunningham his rookie year, Dante Culpepper when he was good, Tom Brady. So he definitely had some guys, and my friend Wright's asking me who they had as quarterbacks. Meanwhile, Owens had like Jeff Garcia, Romo, who was probably the best actual throwing quarterback he played with, Donovan McNabb, I think, is not as good as people remember. I'm a big McNabb fan. I think he was a bit of a gamer, but he was not that good of a thrower technically. But their average quarterback again was about the same. So, and let me move this over here so people can see it. Boom. Yeah, he had Steve Young for I think 2 or 3 years, but this was at the end of Steve Young's career. So, honestly, yeah, the quarterbacks they had were not that good. I mean, really, you have Romo is the best that Terrell Owens ever played with, and obviously Brady was the best that Moss ever played with. Also, if you look at their New England stats, the year that Matt Castle played, Owens' production drops a lot. Again, I think this kind of goes to the fact that while I agree that Moss probably overall had bigger play ability in terms of an average catch or times throughout the season, although again, I say that with sort of the caveat that Owens could catch a ball anywhere. Owens could catch a 5-yard slant and house it, I think, way better than Moss could, right? But in terms of just big catchability, obviously Moss wins that. And I think without someone like Brady throwing to him, his production dips a lot. You also think about in Minnesota, guys like Culpepper and Cunningham, guys who had big arms, who could get him the ball anywhere. Moss thrived with guys like that. Yeah, well, I mean, again, those guys, you got to realize he had an old Steve Young. Steve Young never had over 100 QBR when he played with them. And then he had Jeff Garcia for like 3 or 4 years. He only played with McNabb for 2 years. And one of those years is when he got hurt, remember? And then he had that Super Bowl game. So again, he didn't exactly play with, and again, McNabb's not that good of like a thrower. Like McNabb's not really like a pick you apart, run the West Coast offense kind of guy. And Romo was probably the best quarterback that Owens played with there for 3 years in Dallas. So you got to realize Owens spent 7-8 years in San Francisco. Five or 6 of those were with Jeff Garcia, right? Jeff Garcia had 1 or 2 okay years, and then after that he fell off a cliff. He was okay. You can go back and look up their ratings. He was not as good as you probably remember. Same with McNabb. Just looking at their ratings, Jeff Garcia did have 1 or 2 good years, but again, when he came in and replaced Steve Young, he was not that good. And then towards the end of Owens' time in San Francisco, he was horrible, to be honest with you. He was not that good either. Garcia, 4-time Pro Bowler. Well, I mean, Moss played 2 years with Tom Brady as well. And again, Randall Cunningham wasn't a scrub, and neither was Dante Culpepper. Yeah, hey, right. If you want to call into Discord, let me know. I'll open it up. But anyways, let me get my opening spiel out of the way here. Owens one time led the league in scrimmage yards per touch. Moss never did that, and as far as I know, it's pretty rare for a wide receiver to lead in scrimmage yards per touch. Owens did that one time. Moss 5 times led the league in touchdowns. Owens did it 3 times. So I think, in terms of, like, again, the big playability, I think Moss gets the nod in that. The other thing I wanted to address was, Owens being a diva. This is one thing I actually never really bought into. Owens gets kind of labeled as a diva. Let's remember that Randy Moss didn't exactly have the best reputation either in terms of being a diva as a wide receiver. He essentially largely got ran out of every team he played as well. And say what you want about Owens being a diva, correct? Owens came to play way more than Randy Moss ever did over the length of their career, right? Owens was definitely more of a gamer, definitely took his body and working out seriously, and that also showed later in their career. You got to realize, like, the last 2 years of Owens' career at Buffalo and Cincinnati, I believe he led Cincinnati in yards and receptions and receiving touchdowns. This is the last year of his career. And even at Buffalo, he had 829 yards on 109 targets. 55 receptions isn't necessarily that good. A 15.1 yards per average, which is one of his best and would be one of the best compared to him or Moss. So, like, even late in his career, Owens was still a beast. He was still a starting caliber wide receiver. Moss, if you remember, he essentially got ran out of New England this last year. He bounced around 3 teams, Minnesota, New England, and Tennessee, his second to last year that he played. He then and he put up essentially no numbers that year. No numbers even worth mentioning. He then retired for a year, right? He retired because, and let's not forget his stint in Oakland, which was horrible. He retired for a year because he couldn't get on a winning team and he wasn't getting paid enough, right? That to me is a really bad look in terms of wanting to call Owens a diva. And again, maybe Owens was a diva, right? But you think about the broken fibula and torn ligaments that he had in the Super Bowl. Owens' biggest complaint was just to get him the ball, right? And people might not like this, but anytime you got Owens the ball, usually good things happened. And I can't remember one time, but I remember watching a game, and it might have been even with the Cowboys before he left Philly, but he was complaining about getting the ball. And I mean, literally the next possession, he gets like a 10 or 15 yard pass, and he just houses it, right? And it's just one of those things where, yeah, Owens might have been a diva, but Owens came to play, and Owens was a gamer, and Owens was ultra competitive, super competitive, uber competitive, right? And I think about if I was in a locker room, right, I would much rather put up with Terrell Owens, who at least I know he comes to play. He might be loudmouthed, he might be annoying, but man, he comes to play, and there's no doubt about it. I would take that 9 times out of 10 over Randy Moss, who just kind of came off like a little bitch sometimes, to be honest with you, right? Like, Owens never really came off like a little, whiny bitch, right? He just came off like he was super competitive, and he'd get frustrated and things like that. And yeah, he could be a pain in the neck, but the famous word was like he was a cancer, right? I don't really buy into that. I think if you're in the pros, you got to understand you're going to deal with personalities like that, and he was good. So when you're good, you get a little room to complain and yell at other people and whatnot, right? Randy Moss essentially quit his second to last year because he couldn't get on a team that he liked. or that wasn't a contender, and couldn't get enough money that he thought he was due, right? And then he comes back with San Francisco and essentially has 50 targets, 28 receptions. Again, just absolute scrub, right? The last 2 years that Owens was in the league, he went and played for Buffalo and Cincinnati, two teams that were not contenders, and he just balled out. Still, he was still a force. He was still dominant, and I think that's another edge that Owens has over Moss. Is Owens definitely was a gym rat, took care of his body, was definitely always in phenomenal shape, and I think it paid off later on in his career. Whereas Moss, I think Moss just thought he was going to go out for his entire career and just quote unquote Moss everybody, right? So I kind of give Moss, looking back now, the last couple of years Moss had, and the fact that he got essentially run out of town everywhere he went to. That's definitely a big knock on him, and I actually think Moss is the bigger diva, right? Owens might be more annoying. There might be a lot more friction with someone like Owens, but there's no doubt he came to play, right? And I think as like some, not to like, pat my own back, but like someone who's played competitive basketball and played rugby for 5 years, like I can take someone being a douchebag, I can take someone being annoying, but if when we step on the field, like you bring it, there's no qualms, there's no worries. I don't care. I can look past that and get over it, right? As long as you're doing your job and you're giving it 100%, that's fine. If I was playing with someone like Moss, I think I would not like him at all. Like I wouldn't even want him on my team. I would see no. I don't think the value would outweigh, especially later. I'm more talking later in his career. Maybe the way he acted in Oakland too. Like you can kick rocks, dude. Like I don't want you on my team, But someone like Owens, you can be on my team. Like we can butt heads, but because I know you're gonna bring it, right? I know that you're gonna have my back, and I know you're gonna bring it every single game, right? So I just wanted to get that over with in terms of like Owens being a diva. I think that's a little overblown on Owens' part, and I think Moss doesn't get enough criticism for being a diva as well. And I think he's much more of a pansy and much more of a quitter than Owens ever was, especially looking at the end of their careers, right? So I wanted to get that out of the way. And in terms of heroics, right? Owens' game in the Super Bowl is like, I know they didn't win, but it's the stuff of legends, right? Essentially had to sit out. He sat out the 7 weeks before that. A broken fibula and torn ligaments, something to that nature. Essentially wasn't even cleared to play, the day before the game or 2 days before the game. Goes out and he puts up, I think it was like 12 receptions for 129 yards, right? On like 16 targets or something, just something ridiculous like that, right? So I also look at that, and I think it just goes further to prove what I was saying a second ago, that Owens, look, love or hate Owens, right? I tend to lean a little bit. I like Owens more than I hate him. Again, this conversation is definitely a toss up. I don't necessarily feel that strong one way or another, correct? But if you put a gun to my head, metaphorically, I would probably take Owens over Randy Moss in terms of being in my locker room, playing with the guy, having to stand shoulder to shoulder with him on the field. I think I would rather take Owens most of the time than Randy Moss, right? Randy Moss is one of those guys when like things are going well, he's funny, he moons the Green Bay Packers, he's probably all smiles, right? But the moment there's a little bit of adversity or something, I think Moss's tune changes all the time. And I think whether Owens is winning or losing, he's the same headache. And at least he can be consistent, and he's just uber competitive, right? And I think Owens actually deserves maybe more credit than flack in terms of that, right? Because a lot of guys have bad attitudes or whatever, but they don't bring it, right? They're not that good. They can't demand that kind of respect. Owens could, right? So that's just what I wanted to say about that. So again, I think you could argue that Moss's ceiling is a little higher, but Moss's ceiling is only that much higher than Owens, right? We're talking about two all-time greats. However, their floors, I think the difference in their floors is a pretty wide margin. I think Owens's floor is so much higher than Randy Moss's floor. I think Randy Moss's floor is essentially almost a nobody in some ways, right? You look at his last like 3-4 years in the league, he really wasn't that good. And Owens went from like team to team, quarterback to quarterback, Buffalo and Cincinnati his last 2 years, and was still one of the best wide receivers in the game, right? And I think that speaks volumes about Owens' work ethic and his attitude and his competitiveness. Had 9 Pro Bowlers. How many did Moss have? I mean, he had Tom Brady 2 years. I think Tom Brady won the MVP the year they broke the record in touchdowns. But it doesn't really matter because I looked up their quarterback rating and essentially they're the same. So on average, this is what I want to know. Were they Pro Bowlers the years they played with them? That's what I want to know. Was it in terms of playing with Pro Bowlers, 9 times he had a Pro Bowl quarterback? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Well, that's an interesting stat. I mean, I'll have to look it up. That doesn't really sway my opinion too much because their QBRs were essentially the same over their careers. And I would say Tom Brady's definitely the best quarterback either one of them played with. I don't think McNabb's that much better than Dante Culpepper when he was good. In fact, Dante Culpepper might have had the highest quarterback rating out of any of the quarterbacks they played with, if I remember right. And Jeff Garcia, like even I guess there was a couple of years he was a Pro Bowler. I'm more interested in the stats because Pro Bowls are, I don't know if that's so much like a stat with a lot of weight on it. Essentially, Brady's saying that Terrell Owens had 9 years where he had a quarterback Pro Bowler and Moss only had 4. So, I mean, I guess so, but like a lot of times, like let's say a guy makes the Pro Bowl and one doesn't. Like, what's the difference in their stats? Probably not much, right? That's kind of my point. Being a Pro Bowler isn't exactly. It's like All-Star games in a way. Like, if one guy had teammates that played on 10 All-Star games, and another guy had teammates that played on 7 All-Star games, like I guess it's a little bean to add to the pile, but it doesn't necessarily like sway me one way or the other. You could still have great players that maybe with context they were injured in the beginning of the year and then they turned it on, so they missed the All-Star game, but they were back to an All-Star caliber level. The quarterbacks overall throughout their career were very similar. I guess I should have wrote down like a year by year comparison, but because like even if we look at like his rookie year, Randall Cunningham had a quarterback rating of 106. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty. That's definitely one of the higher ones. Did Randall Cunningham make a Pro Bowl? Probably not. Um, let's see. Randy Moss's sophomore year, he had Jeff George, quarterback rating of 94. Not the best. That's probably one of the down years. Did Cunningham make a Pro Bowl? I would assume he did. I mean, Culpepper. Culpepper's got a 98 rating. His third year, throws for 33 TDs. That's pretty good. 16 interceptions. Then Culpepper, I remember he did start to fall off. The 2 Oakland years were definitely not that good. I don't think. Kerry Collins, beast, absolute monster. Kerry Collins. But yeah, I mean that's fine. Like that doesn't even if you would say Owens had better quarterbacks. I mean, by how much? I guess I'd be interested. I didn't break it down that much. I could, I guess, but I wasn't that invested in this topic, I suppose, to that degree. All I did was I went year to year and looked at their main quarterbacks QBR, and essentially they averaged out to 91 and 92 respectively. So I mean, the Pro Bowls are fine. That's a win for Moss, I guess. But again, these guys essentially played the same amount of games, and Owens essentially wins almost every single stat except for which one was it? Moss has one more yard per reception than Owens does, and then after that, Moss has the high in touchdowns 5 times compared to Owens is 3. These guys had the same amount of touchdowns too, which is kind of crazy. Like these guys' stats are eerily similar in many ways, but Owens wins in 8 out of 10 categories, 9 out of 10 categories. Moss has some slightly bigger highs. I think Owens' floor is a lot higher than Moss's. So yeah, I mean that's kind of it. Ryan didn't hop on, so I was just gonna kind of give my spiel for Owens, making the case. But yeah, I think Owens also is a lot more of a complete receiver. Even with those Pro Bowls and the quarterbacks, I still think Owens doesn't need as good of a quarterback than what Moss does in terms of Owens can run a 10-yard slant and house it, for, especially in his prime and even into his latter days. You don't need necessarily the best quarterback to do that. I do think you need a little bit of a better quarterback to get you the ball over the top in stride and on point, right? And also, if you look at Moss's, if you go like kind of year by year, it is obvious that like he got more targets certain years and his production was up. Those were probably some of the better years he had quarterbacks. Again, like when you look at someone like Tom Brady, right? Essentially the 2 years. So the middle year, I believe, was when Brady got hurt. In Moss's first and third year with New England's when he played with Brady, essentially are 2 of his best years, along with 2 years in Minnesota. Maybe those are 4 years he had the Pro Bowl. I'd be interested to see that too. But again, thanks, appreciate it, man. Yeah. Always like to, yeah. My friend I was gonna debate didn't show up, so I'm just kind of spieling on. I was gonna take the side of Owens, but I don't really feel too strongly about this one either way, so it's not the biggest deal. If someone wanted to push really hard on Moss being better, I mean I'm not necessarily gonna fight him, but I just think to kind of wrap it up here, it's about 30 minutes we've gone. Just to kind of wrap it up, I think Owens being a diva, I think is overplayed. Also compared to Moss being a diva sometimes, and with the caveat that I think in terms of them both being divas, Owens definitely was more of a gamer. Definitely came to play more than Moss did. Took care of his body. Was way better longer into his career. Definitely, I don't think was as big of a quitter. And I just think Owens being, people not liking Owens, I think that's kind of a bitch move sometimes. Like we're talking about professional athletes, right? And a guy who's really good gets more leeway that way. Secondly, I will give up the argument that Moss's highs were a little better than Owens's, but not by much. And I think Owens's floor is way higher than Moss's floor in terms of consistency, especially later into their career. And then I'm just going to bring up the Super Bowl game where Owens essentially just went off while playing on a broken fibula, fractured fibula or whatever, and torn ligaments. I think that game proves that as much of a headache that Owens was, he came to play, right? And that's really all you can ask of guys. And I think when you look at some of the antics that Moss did, like, I don't know, man, some of that stuff just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, especially like his last 2 or 3 years and his time in Oakland, right? Just kind of my opinion on it. Yeah. Oh man, yep, I'm still undefeated. And then I made the video last night. My appeal to the chat, to the listeners, right, is in terms of like the Manziel and the Young debate. I took the hard position on that one. Okay, I took the minority position. I still feel like I won. I made a rebuttal video. Ian, I'm calling you out. If you want to go around two, we can. I would love to. I think after I really deep dived into the subject, I think it's clear Manziel was better. I don't. In fact, I don't even. I said this from the beginning. I don't think it's close, to be honest with you. But Ian won the poll on that one. But again, I took the much harder stance and position. I think taking Owens against Moss is the harder stance and position as well. So people listening and people in the chat, remember that your boy's taking hard positions for you. It's not even close. And I'm taking hard positions for you, and I feel like I'm arguing them pretty good. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I just want to make this video. I promised we'd hop on it too and do the debate. Rennie no shows. Rennie no shows didn't. I don't know what happened to him. He's MIA. He probably woke up this morning and it dawned on him he was going against the GOAT. It happens to the best of us. So, yeah, but that's my video. That's my case for for Owens. So again, great. The two of the top 5 wide receivers of all time, right? Like, and you guys honestly should go look at their stats. They are, it is remarkable how similar they are. Like, not even kidding, not even trying to like be, exaggerate or anything like that. Like, they are crazy similar, right? So they essentially, I'm going to look at it right now. They essentially played the same amount of games, 218 to 219. I'll say Owens first, and then I'll say Moss. So Owens had 219 career games. Moss had 218. Games started, 201 for Owens, 193 for Moss. Targets, 1,867 for Owens, 1,741 for Moss. Receptions, 1,078 for Owens, 982 for Moss. Career yards, 15,934 for Owens, 15,292 for Moss. Touchdowns, 153 for Owens, 156 for Moss. Owens also had 3 rushing TDs, so they literally are at a tie for 156. I think Moss has a punt return or 2 in there, so maybe Moss technically has like 1 or 2 more touchdowns, I think. Their career yards per reception is 14.8 for Owens, 15.6 for Moss. That's a slight edge that he has. Let's see. Oh, first down receptions. Not sure that's a big stat, but Owens has 747. Moss has 704. Receptions per game, 4.9 for Owens, 4.5 for Moss. Yards per game in their career, 72.8 for Owens, 70.1 for Moss. Catch percentage, again, Owens is 1.3 better percent, which I found interesting because for all the flack of Owens dropping balls, I couldn't find any drop pass stats either, which I thought was kind of weird. I guess they're kind of hard to track in a way. I'm not sure how that works exactly. But yeah, I mean, they're and if you go in the records and stuff, like, they both have tons of records. I think Moss has a few more, but some of those might be a little irrelevant or not that big of a deal, right? But yeah, I mean, these guys are so close. Really, the only difference is their styles. One's more of an over-the-top. One's more of like a gamer, breaking tackles, kind of hard to bring down. But yeah, that's my video. That's the live stream. So maybe we'll trying to do the I think the best finals runs, Houston versus the 2011 Mavs, and I'm going to try and prove a conspiracy in terms of the 06 finals on the Mavs. That'll be another hard one to prove, but I'll take the stance on it. So yeah, I think that's it for the live stream. I just wanted to give you guys some content because I said we'd do the debate at 2, and I want to just do it. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and as always, I'll see